First guy here with my guy, Ty. Super excited to dig into, is it impossible to invest in California? As a couple Northern California guys, we get this question every single day.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion. And I would say it's almost a bit of a mythology that, oh, you can't invest in California. There's no way California, I'll never invest in California, or people in California that go out of state. But the truth is, yes, you can invest in California. You just have to know the markets.
So. Right. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is that people, can tell you it's impossible. The prices, the tenant laws, any number of excuses. And then you and I, active in the market of California, have just countless examples. So I'd love to give people some examples because I think that they work well with examples, as a broker in the East Bay and serving, Northern California as a whole. What do investor clients of yours actively do in 2024? Because some people will say, oh, you bought back in 2013, so that's why you're able to invest here. What are you doing today?
Yeah, and so two things that I'll answer on that question is that is true. The idea is that instead of trying to time the market, it's time inside of or time in the market, right?
Right.
So that's a big deal. So sure, the person who bought houses in the 1980s, 1990s, the 2000s, 2013, of course they're winning because properties have gone up 2, 3, 4, 5x, whatever the case may be. And then also, of course, rents have also, just incredible, right? They've outpaced. So the reality is in 2024, right now, today, there are still opportunities in California. You just have to know the markets. And so a couple things that you mentioned, and we can unpack, talk deeper on each one of these, but I'll just kind of grace over. You've got the rent control, right? So in parts of like LA, very hardcore rent control. Same thing, San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley. California as a whole has rent control, but not as strict, not as overbearing per se. And so you still can do business in other markets, Central Valley, parts of the East Bay, parts of the North Bay. There's still a lot of opportunity. Also parts of Southern California. You just have to know that. And then the other thing you look at is that when people think of California, friends from out of state, friends from Chicago, people from New York, what do they think of? They think of LA. They think of Disneyland. They think of Hollywood. They think of beaches everywhere. And that is, yes, true, one part of California, or they think of the Golden Gate Bridge, right? Yes, San Francisco and Orange County and LA is very expensive. But then when you go east, what we would refer to suburban communities, commuter communities, if you look at that where people are basically commuting back into the job markets, places like Contra Costa County, places like Solano County, Sacramento, right. San Joaquin County. And then you even have these just micro economies like Fresno, California, where Michael Zuber invests, or Bakersfield. So there's a lot of opportunity in California.
Right. Yeah. And I've had this conversation with investors, and I believe this, right, is that, it's not a one size fits all. Some people might be dying for cash flow and, hey, I can buy 6 properties out of state and I pay $175,000 each for them, and I'm going to cash flow $2,500 a month. That's going to, do something to help me, get out of the rat race. In California, you can control millions in real estate, and it might only be a few properties. And I looked up a stat. You can, verify this for me if you want.
Please.
Over the last 40 years, California has appreciated on average 6.7% a year. And
Sounds
so
right.
Being a math guy, you control $1 million in real estate, which might be 1 or 2 pieces of property in California. Even in a more affordable, $500,000 single family market like Sacramento.
Sure.
Every year, we're talking $67,000 in appreciation. So what's your thought personally? Because I haven't asked you this question personally.
Yeah.
What's your thought personally on, wealth accumulation through holding real estate, even an asset that might break even?
100% believer. And I want to say that California is a great market, and people would be foolish to just overlook it on broad strokes of rent control, or it's too expensive, or it doesn't cash flow. And I'll even go something even more basic and simple, because again, you're Matt, the mortgage guy. I'm probably more known today for being a creative finance guy and subject to and investing in wholesaling and flipping. But I also still run a very, very strong listing agent. I'm a broker. I'm still very active in day-to-day retail, what I call retail business, meaning dealing with regular sellers and buyers and friends and family and things of that nature. And so primarily, I'll go back to the simple basics. Number one, if you can afford to buy a home versus be a tenant, you should absolutely buy a home, whether that's buying through VA, FHA, conforming, some type of special programs that have, that come and go. Everybody should own their home if they plan to stay in those markets for 3 to 5, 5 to 7 or more years. So that's number one. My aunt and uncle is an example. Other family members, and we were just laughing, talking with John here on the production team. We were talking about, mom and dad when they bought their house, or the grandparents when they bought their house. You look at time in the market, not timing, but time inside of the market. That's where a lot of wealth is created. And then not only that, but also the tax code, where people have an exemption, $250,000 as a single filer, $500,000 for joint, meaning like a husband and wife, for a household, for a primary residence. So that in itself is such a loophole. I know of clients that don't consider themselves quote unquote investors, but they've basically just moved into a house, fixed it up, rode the wave of the market, cashed out $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of net gain equity, tax free, and then rinse and repeat. Go buy another house, put 20% down, qualify for a mortgage, do it again. I've known people that have done that, 3-4 times over the last 15 years and just riding the wave, right? So that's number one. Also too, just like my aunt and uncle, they lived in their house for like 30 or 40 years, paid it off, the whole thing. And then they finally sold it. They moved into something a little bit more like smaller. And, they were able to put, I don't know exact numbers, but let's call it, several $100,000 of tax-free money in their pocket. So even from a basic fundamental level of owning your own home, you can do it. And I think if you can't afford, if you live in the peninsula or San Francisco or in, LA, maybe you go out a little further. Maybe you go 30, 40 minutes out. And especially too today with remote working and such, lots of opportunities there. But even as an example, people going from, say, Davis, California, that's a market kind of in between you and I, right. Very expensive. But people are buying in Sacramento, and you can buy a nice, entry-level home, $550,000, $600,000, maybe less, depending on, I see stuff in there, $380,000, $400,000. And even cash flow wise, those deals can pencil with the right kind of financing.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
As an investment.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about a couple of different things as you spoke too, because that wealth accumulation and the equity build. Yep. It doesn't have to be the forever play. Yep. But if you plan to hold it for 10, 15, 20 years and you create this wealth, whether it's, the primary and you can do, a sale and tap that equity of $500,000 as a couple tax-free, or you hold investment properties. You gain hundreds of thousands, even 7 figures in equity. Yep. You 1031 exchange that, maybe at a different point in life, you want to go buy a portfolio of 14 homes, or you want to go buy an apartment complex that spits off $10,000 a month. Yep. That's an option. Yep. Right. And so I think, I've heard it on different podcasts, but I've actually seen it in real life with clients where there's a wealth accumulation phase, and California, an appreciation market, is a great place to do that. And then later in life, when it's like, okay, now I need some cash flow. Okay, take $1 million in equity, take $1.5 million in equity. You might be able to 1031 buy an apartment complex cash, right? And then just have $15,000 a month that comes in after all the management, after all the things are done, and that's the play.
Spot on. And I want to comment on that too, because I think too, like as an example, I've seen friends and acquaintances and such go out of state for the quote unquote sexy cash flow, right? Oh, I can go out to, somewhere in the Midwest, spend $200,000, buy a place, and, it's going to put off, net cash flow, $200, $300, $400 a month. If everything goes right. Right. Okay. Also not including reserves, because you're going to have turns and things. So sometimes that quote unquote net cash flow, you have to put money back in, the tenant moves out, you got to repaint, you got to do things. Surprises on maintenance, things of that nature. So, sometimes the grass isn't always greener. And I'll say this too, for age-wise in different seasons of life. So for a young person who maybe, and I'll define young in this context, somebody who's in their 20s or maybe even early mid 30s, my definition of young in this context, if your horizon is you're working, you have, good income, you like your job, you're working in whatever you do, your W-2 or whatever that is, and you are even realtors making commissions and you enjoy and you make money, you're a good earner, but you want to have money set aside. California, great, maybe where you're buying that $400,000 house in California, around the corner, not too far away from home, you can self-manage. Maybe you're not getting that $300 or $400 a month positive cash flow. Maybe it's smaller. Maybe you're even quote unquote break even, but because you get depreciation, you get the tax write-off, with not just the write-off of the interest, but depreciation. And you look that up if you don't know what that is. But the depreciation offsetting some of your normal income, but also the fact that that $400,000 house, my guess is 10 or 15 years, that house is going to go up. You're going to have, like you said, average 6% plus appreciation in California over the last 50 years. And of course, if you even look at, it was abnormal in if you bought in 2019, it was a little bit of a unicorn, but during the pandemic, some properties doubled and almost tripled, depending on the location. So, but point being, long-term, you're always going to get a couple of things. You're going to get the write-off, you're going to get the appreciation, property value growth, that equity growth, but you're also going to get the pay down on the mortgage.
Right.
So some people, if you don't really need the cash flow, again, buying in your own backyard in California can make more sense as a long-term growth strategy versus putting that money in the stock market and hoping that, and again, stock market grows too, but we have the ebb and flows. One thing with real estate, it always seems to recover.
Right.
Housing is always a basic need. So that's why I'm so pro California and pro, investment on that side of, people investing in their own backyard.
Yeah. Couldn't agree with you more. And that's the thing too, is if you've got a long horizon, if you're going to hold it for a decade, you're almost always going to win in real estate. I don't know if you saw this graph that I posted, but from 1942 to today, there's only 1 year where you could buy real estate and 10 years later it was worth less.
Yeah.
2006.
Yep. And
When
I never
bought my
seen
first
that.
property. When I
Yeah.
bought my first property in 2006.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So I'm a great timer of the market, right?
Sure.
And so, yeah, to your point too, it's, even in a conservative estimate, that $400,000 house can be worth $650. You're going to owe $250. So you're going to have $400,000 in equity. What you choose to do with that, that's the great part about this, is like you can pivot. You might have different wants, needs, goals a decade from now, 2 decades from now. So then you decide,
Yep.
do I sell? Do I, deploy the money elsewhere? Do I hold on to it? Do I refinance? Do I pull cash out? There's all kinds of different things you can do with it, but I'm a big believer in California real estate. You mentioned stocks. I know plenty of people that do both, right?
Yeah.
You've got some in stock, you've got some in real estate, but don't sleep on California real estate.
Don't sleep on California.
Yeah.
And I think too, and I think for, the average, and again, somebody who's W-2, they're maxing out their 401k, they've got some stock stuff going. Again, potentially investing in real estate, and if nothing else, owning their own home, their principal residence, getting the tax write-off versus being a tenant. All of those things make sense. And again, even if I look at, so as an example, even deals that I ended up not doing well with in 2007, 2008, deals that really imploded in my face, even if I had the ability or the foresight to just write them out, figure out a way to modify the loans, figure out a way to, forbearance and just navigate, even though those properties, a lot of them got cut in half or more, all of those properties today, even before the pandemic, 2018, 2019, coming out of like say 2008, 2009, all of those properties still had massive appreciation. So again, like you said, the long-term 10-year horizon is a very, very safe and I believe to be a smart investment.
Yep. I love it, man. Thank you so much for your time, Ty. I got to get on a flight back to California. Go look at some California real estate.
I love it, man. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, brother.